All right, y'all. Welcome back to Boss Mentality. On today's episode, we're going to talk about lone wolves and leadership. We're going to start before we start talking about this today. JL, we're going to launch our first clip. So let's get a second to load that up and we get started with that.
Number 3 lessons the richest man I've ever known taught me about business. Never work with lone wolves because they will eventually burn you. Many entrepreneurs fall into this category at some point, myself included. The problem is that you get so married to the idea of doing everything yourself, you fail to recognize when someone else is helping you, investing in you, taking a chance on you. You see everything as a result of your own labor. And because of that, these type of people give you no reciprocal energy, gratitude, thanks. They end up being takers. They're also the first to cut and run when things get hard. They will never save your butt because they don't perceive that you have ever saved theirs. They'll cut you out of deals, and they'll do all of this unintentionally. That's what makes them very dangerous. They don't think they're being nefarious. They have tunnel vision on doing everything themselves. They have no space for anyone else, but it still ends up in you getting burned.
Okay. I like her points. I do.
Me
When
too.
it comes, yeah. When it comes down to leadership, because normally when you see things like that, you don't hear a lot of the backlash with lone wolf mentality. Okay.
Right.
And so many times when we can be in different environments, especially like I said, when you have, experienced certain things or, you have certain personality traits. Yes, you like I said, nothing's wrong with being, like I said, having that like, strong leadership potential, sort of having that like loner type of mentality. But when you're with a group of people, when you're leading a group of people, it can become detrimental and it can become in a very in a harsh way a very selfish type of mindset too as well when you're just focused on your own bottom line in leadership. And I like how she sort of like phrase that like especially when you are like building your own company or you're just like in a new place of leadership within the company. I like how she had that mindset when you're thinking about just yourself, you're not even thinking about your team's growth with you and your division, or you're not thinking about your team's growth with you leading your corporation. And that's something that's essential, JL, in the market to be aware of how you're impacting your team with their overall training process, with their overall growth with you there. Are you being like, oblivious to their growth potential? Or are you just looking at them as like another number to get to your goals?
Exactly. I like the part really where she spoke on them having no reciprocal energy. They're not. There's no reciprocity in what they're bringing to the table. And it's like those people, as she said in the video, they don't even realize that they're doing it. It's very unintentional, and that's what makes it so dangerous. When you have somebody that doesn't even realize that they are taking more than they're giving
Yeah.
to their team. It's very, very dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, they feel like nobody has their back, so they don't have your back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, sometimes you're not even in a position where you would need to have their back, but their mentality is so one track minded and so just narrow minded that they're
Right.
not even realizing that their actions are basically just it's just me, myself, and I. Just me.
That's
That's
all I
it.
got in the end.
That's
That's
all
what
they
I
got in
found out.
the
You
end.
Beyonce on there.
Right, like
Look,
that's really how they feel. Like that's all they have. And the whole time
yeah,
you're working in a team, you're not working by yourself.
yeah,
And so it is hard to work with these people,
mhm,
with that mentality. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with, being a self-starter, self-motivator, and working
mhm,
by yourself when doing certain tasks. But at the end of the day, if you're working as a team in a corporation or organization, you
yeah,
do have to learn how to work with others. You do have to learn if you're in the supervisor role how to guide others. You know what I'm saying? And so being a lone wolf, like she said, is very dangerous. And when you have this mentality, you have to check yourself. You have to check yourself and go, okay, now, am I involving other people? Am I
mhm,
involving myself? This could be with anything. This could be, you could be playing sports. And you know what
right,
I'm saying? You have somebody that's the main star on the team, right? But in
mhm,
order for them to win, they still have to get others involved.
right, right,
You
right,
this is it's still it's a team game at the end of the day. You can't
mhm,
do it all by yourself. You may win one game, if you're in the playoff series, you may win one or two games, quote unquote, by yourself. But then ultimately you still need the entire team to pitch in to help you win. And that's the same thing as when you're at, in an office and work environment. You
Yeah.
may do something, by yourself, and you may work really well by yourself. But at the end of the day, in order for everything to run as smoothly as it can,
Mm-hmm.
everybody has to be on one accord, and you have to get everybody involved.
Yeah, yeah. What's I'm trying to think of the term. Hyper independence. That's
Mhm.
what I'm thinking about. A lot of times that people don't understand that they can face things in life that can make them hyper independent, and that's
Yeah.
a form of that's a toxic response. That's an unhealthy response. And of course, like I said, we all face different things in life that cause us to be the way that we are. But you have to understand a lot of times when people sort of think of hyper independence, they're like, okay, well, son, I can get to my goals, I can do this. And yes, you can, but when you're in a whole new season in life, you can't put on the same hat. Okay. There's some
Mhm.
seasons in life that you have to work with your team. When you have that survival tactic,
Right.
JL, you know, that could be a major, major hindrance when it comes down to your overall growth process. And so many times we look at some of these like, things in our personality and we don't really analyze and say, okay, something, is this really helping me? Or are you still living in 2005 when the trauma happened to you? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people, they just take on those trauma, interactions into the workplace, not only just in their personal relationships, but also into the workplace, and they don't realize it. They don't realize how that's developed and honed their personalities in ways that can hinder them in every aspect of life, including, in the workplace. And so when you're in a position of leadership, you have to really ask yourself, are you leading or are you just working alone with the
Mhm.
title of supervisor, a title
Yeah,
of manager? Like, are you actually leading people? You know what I'm saying? Are you just focused on yourself or are you focused on the team?
mhm,
You have to really explore what it really means to lead, versus just executing, tasks by yourself.
right.
You know what I'm saying? You have authority over others, but are you cultivating an environment that really helps everybody work together to finish and complete task?
Yeah,
So I think it's easy for people to be like, you know what, I'll just do it myself.
yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like I don't even want to worry. I don't worry about it. I'll do it.
yeah, yeah.
And I feel like people don't realize that you can also alienate your team members when you have that type of mentality.
And it makes you kind of like it has that selfish type of edge to it as well because it's like, okay, well, you don't see the good things that people are doing for you, like she said in the video. Uh, you know, it comes to a point with your team. It's like, well, I handle this. And so they could be helping you out. They could be sort of like encouraging you or doing their job. And you're just seeing you as that big person. You know what I'm saying? You're taking that leadership stage. And it's like, people are like, this person just doesn't get that, they can't run this whole team. I'm putting in this amount of energy. I'm putting in this amount of effort. It's like, it's that overcompensation when it comes down to doing your job, as a leader.
Exactly.
Because it's
Yeah,
like that's not even a practical mindset. And it's like I said before, it's a selfish type of mindset where you're thinking that the only person that can handle or do this is myself. And like I said, when things go down the line where it comes down to delegating or something goes wrong, then you're quick to put the blame on your team. And no one wants to be on that bottom line, when it comes down to like, the person that's over them and they're throwing them underneath the bus because that person doesn't see their worth in the company.
exactly. Exactly. And so let's also that also kind of goes into how being a lone wolf type of leader also makes you a hands-off type of leader as well. You know what I'm saying? Where a lot of people we have dealt with, I'm sure I know I have dealt with supervisors that are just way too hands-on,
Yeah,
just micromanage everything that you do, and they
yeah,
won't even let you do your job. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that are way too hands off.
yeah.
And it's almost like they're absent. You know what I'm saying? So let's kind of dive into how being too laid back and just too hands off can easily turn into being disengaged
Right.
with the team. Let's talk about that.
I think, like you said before, like, having that hands off type of mentality, I think, like I said, nothing's wrong with having a laid back personality. But here's the thing about laid back personalities when you have it in the workforce. When you're hands off, like I said, once again, people can't read your mind. That's number one. They can't read your
Mhm,
mind. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know how you're processing information. And when things come to fruition, okay, later on down the line, when things got to be met, and they're used to that hands-off mentality, okay, and they weren't probably trained properly, or they don't know the procedures properly because you're not, explaining those different things when it comes down to, like, their job and their purpose of their job. So because you have in your mindset, like you said earlier, I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, so you already in your mindset are breaking away from delegating things properly in that workspace. So when that comes, with that coming on to fruition, in the office, it can make people look at you sort of like, really confused, because it's like, okay, well, I'm not getting the proper help and assistance that I'm needing from my manager, because they're not even aware as far as, like, how to express certain things that they need on, from me as a co-worker, from me as, like I said, a lateral employee. When you have your mindset sort of tied to just sort of like, just going about those the methods, like, completely hands off, and you're not really engaging with your team, it's you're still working like a subordinate. Okay, you're not working like as a leader, you're working still like a subordinate. So,
mhm,
when you're in a different season of life, especially with leadership, you can't handle that past season the same way. Okay, like I said, there's some jobs, like I said, when you're a subordinate, you could go in, do your job, go out. You don't got to engage. You don't got to communicate. As a leader, you can't do that. You can't go in. You can't go into your leadership job. You can't go into, your job, managing like a whole team or a whole division, and not make any impact on your team and think that, okay, well, I'm just gonna put in my hours, okay, put in my time, and the rest of the chips are on them. Okay,
right.
that becomes very selfish. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, like I said, that lone wolf mentality, we don't really look at that from a larger lens to look and see how selfish that can be in a work environment.
Yeah, because especially if you're in a position of leadership or a position of authority in some way, um, it can come across like, okay, I don't really want to do this. I don't really want to be in this position. I'm just here because of my experience and X, Y, and Z. But
Mhm.
everybody, just because you have experience does not mean you're built for supervising or managing.
Yep.
It's not easy, and everybody's not built for it. I've
Mhm.
been in a position where I've had a supervisor who was super hands off, barely responded to emails, and
Mhm.
it's like, okay, on one end, it's like, okay, you're not micromanaging me, you let me do my job. But on the other end, it's like, I don't even have
A support
the
system.
communication and the support that I need from you to know that I'm doing what I'm doing correctly. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? Unless it's super last minute and now you wanna make a comment on what I have going on. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? But it's like it's hard to work for or work with people that are too hands off, that don't know how to communicate, but they're
Mhm.
in a position of power based off of their seniority or
Right.
based off of their experience or their skills. You may be very skilled at what you do, but that does not make you a good supervisor or manager. It just does not. Because in
Yep.
order for you to be great at being a manager, you also have to learn how to work with others, how to supervise others, and how to um, communicate in a way that's effective for each person. Each person has a different way to communicate. So you have to learn that style and go what and works what's best for that person. Everybody is not going to respond to you in the way that you want them to respond.
Right.
And so we also kind of just we got to realize that, being laid back and being disengaged, it can create space that could be also chaotic. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? There's a difference in between, in giving people autonomy and kind of letting them do their job once they have learned the job
Yeah.
versus leaving them in a leadership vacuum. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? There's a fine line, and a lot of people don't realize that, especially the people that are, have this lone wolf mentality, they don't realize that there's a fine line in letting people do what they need to do once you give them the task versus having them just throwing them out to the wolves basically with
Yep.
no direction, no guidance. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? That it creates chaos. It can create chaos because if you don't, nobody knows what they're doing because you never given them any direction.
Mm.
How are they getting the work done properly?
Right, right, right. And I think that a lot of times these individuals, like, when it comes down to conflict, so many times lone wolves want to avoid a lot of conflict as
Mhm.
well. They have sometimes can have that avoidant type of personality where it's like, they want to just engage with the bare minimum. They want to keep things on like that, that surface type of topical type of level, or not even topical sometimes. They can just have it just on a very more like, okay, I see you coming, I'm gonna be going,
Right.
type of deal. But
Mhm.
you can still with a behavior like that, when you're not engaged, you're gonna run into conflict. So no matter how you feel, like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be like hands-on with my team, or I'm not gonna be present with my team, you're gonna still run into conflict because people are not gonna be happy with how you lead. Like you said, JL, when someone's thrown into the wolves and their back is on the line and they're looking at you like, okay, well, why didn't you tell me this information? They're gonna throw you on the table as well. Okay. So
Mhm.
your supervisors, your leadership is gonna throw you on the table saying to you, okay, what happened? Where was the miscommunication? And if they're looking at you like, okay, did you tell them about ABC? Okay, did you discuss this about what their procedures need to be? Well, they should have learned that during training. They're looking at you, and you're sitting somewhere like, okay, well, no, you didn't do that behavior, or you didn't do that proper training. That's gonna fall on you. So once
And
again,
honestly, it should. Honestly, it
it
should,
should.
because at the end of the day, that's your job.
Yeah, yeah,
That is part of your job to
hmm
lead and to guide and direct when you're in that position.
hmm
So, you have to you have to take the blame for that, at least partial blame for it, because you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and your employees were in dark really about what was going on. When you have that type of mindset, it's like there's good and there's good and bad in being hands off, right?
of
We
course.
know the good in it. You're not micromanaging, you're not overbearing, but then
Yeah,
the bad, side of it is, okay, is your need for control almost like killing your team's growth, right?
right,
You know what I'm
right,
saying? So it's like, okay, certain lone wolves, like she said in the video, lone wolves like to take control or take the lead or take ownership for everything being done, especially when it's all good, right?
right.
So they can basically hoard decision making. When you hoard the decision making and everything is also all on you and you never delegate the task, that can stunt the team development and team growth. Let's get into that as well.
And that's a good point, especially when it comes down to that control point too. A lot of times like they come into that environment, it can be like that environmental control as well. And like I said, when you have that environmental control type of factor, you already have your mindset. This is how it's going to be. I'm do the best when it comes down to like going in my particular way. And like I said, no one knows how your way is because you're not present. But like I said, you're in that space as far as to make sure that your environment is comfortable for yourself, which can be very selfish. And
Hmm.
in that space creates that space of chaos because when you have that environmental control, when it comes down to your team, it creates that chaos with them because no one knows what moves you're doing. No one knows how to properly handle different types of changes. When you look at situations, when it comes down to you holding that control in that lens, you see when things are falling apart, then you sort of have your emotional grid sort of gets sort of unhinged at the moment, and then that sort of gets displayed on your team, and that can be a negative impact as well. Because no one wants to be in the office where it's a guessing game. Okay,
Right.
one minute it goes once it's good, it's good. There's no issues. If someone coming in there, it's like okay, all fine and all chocolate cake, and then once things go sort of sour, okay, because you're not really discussing proper procedures or you're not discussing what's coming down like in the next couple of weeks as far as like job changes or things that need to be changed in your particular department, that's going to have you looking real crazy to your team. Okay, and I think that having that lone wolf type of mentality is still that quiet way as far as like having that likability factor where you want to be likable, because I find
Hmm.
that a lot of lone wolf mentalities still want to have that likability where it's like like almost sort of like I'm the cool mom, I'm the cool dad, like that type of
Yep.
energy. You trying to play it off like I'm the cool boss, I'm
You
this,
can come to me and you don't have to blah blah blah.
yeah,
But yeah, like
it's still
sometimes
limited.
you're a little too hands off.
Yeah, yeah,
The cool mom is a little too hands off sometimes.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? And that could show in the decision making of their children, just like
Mhm.
it can show in the decision making of your team.
Right. Right.
Once you're in that position of leadership, there's certain ways to go about it, and there's a fine line, and it's something that you will learn over the years. You know what I'm saying? It's not nothing that comes easy,
Mhm.
but it's something that's very valuable because at the end of the day, being two hands off is just like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
you have no, like you said, you have no control.
No.
You really have no control over the team. You don't really know what's going on. They don't really know what's going on. So
Exactly.
everybody is like in a state of confusion. And so when you have the big boss, upper management asking you what's going on because your team is underperforming or they're not performing the procedures in the way that it's supposed to be done, you
Mhm.
can really only look at yourself
Right.
and say,
Right.
"What am I doing?"
Yeah. And so many times that could be sort of like a blockage from a lot of lone wolves also as well, because I think with that nature of saying like, oh, I'm cool and collective, it's sort of like, why are people bugging me? I'm not
Mhm.
coming in here causing the drama. So you're looking at it from another spectrum where it's like, okay, well, you're looking from that micromanaging type of aspect where it's like, I'm not doing that. But you have to be aware as far as how your behavior is affecting your team and your method as far as how you run it. Because, like I said, we're all growing here. We're all in a space where it's like I said, our personalities can have some good things about it, but also can have some negative things about it if we're not careful. And that's the biggest thing, too. It's like, nothing's wrong with having that, a good laid back energy, but you still have to be present for your team, because having that laid back energy and you're still acting like, it's a day off for you, okay? That's gonna cause that chaos and that's gonna have people look at you a little bit different, regardless of the fact that how you may think in your mindset, where it's like, okay, well, I'm not that confrontational leader, but you can still be confrontational when you're in a laid back type of seat and you're not handling your situation with your team properly.
Right. I want yeah, like let's be clear, being non-confrontational in every situation does not make you the best leader. You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't mean that you're a great leader just because you're non-confrontational.
Mhm.
Sometimes confrontation it could be good. You know what I'm saying? It could bring out growth. It could bring out success. It could bring out um, you know, other avenues to get things done. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? There could be other ways to get things done that, you know, it could be something that okay, we've done this for so many years. This is how we do it. This is just how we do it. And then
Yeah.
somebody comes along and says, okay, but what if we did it like this to make it more efficient?
Right.
You know
Right.
what I'm saying? That could be a confrontation. That doesn't make it negative. That just means somebody else has a different viewpoint. And if
Exactly.
you're always in the background, oh, well, I don't want to step on nobody's toes, so maybe we shouldn't do that. No, it's okay because sometimes you have to do that to make change.
Exactly.
And change is
Exactly.
sometimes it's not easy, but it's needed.
Exactly. You can't have that same narrative, that same tape that you had back in your past either. Like
Right.
I think so many times when we can lead, from a space as far as like having like past traumas or past experiences, you have to really approach every situation from a fresh start when it comes down to leadership. What happened in the past, like I said, there's some things, like I said, of course, that, we have to have time to heal from, but you owe it to yourself to identify that you're in a new chapter. And when new chapters come, new type of mindsets that you have to apply with your team and people around you.
Absolutely. So let's also talk about how to build trust. How do you build trust without giving up control as someone that is, maybe a lone wolf? Um,
Communication.
yeah,
Communication is the biggest thing. Like, you have to have communication when it comes down to, like, being a lone wolf, or having that loner type of personality. With that communication, then you know what your team is doing. If you don't know what your team is doing on a day-to-day basis, or how their growth process is going, you got someone that's starting in new and you don't know how they're growing within their role. And then when it comes down to it, then you're dumping on them like, negative reviews, or you're dumping on them as far as like, looking at them like they're not efficient. You have to ask yourself, were they given the tools to be efficient in their role? And
exactly.
the biggest thing to do that is like really to make sure to say, hey, where are you with this? How's this going? Having that open communication really helps, grow not only you as an effective leader, as far as like to say, okay, well, this person actually looking at my back, and they want to protect me, and they want to make sure that I'm stable within my knowledge of the company and within my process as far as learning information. That's something that's essential to do. When you, like I said, when you just walk in there and don't have that proper communication with your team, it's going to create question marks. You don't want to have a questioning experience when it comes down to your departments.
Definitely. And it's some things that you could do like, hey, let's have a team meeting at the beginning of the week. Let's talk about what we got going on this week. Like you said, some way to have a powwow, if anything, about what needs to be done. But there's ways to communicate. Hey, you could do a email, Zoom, whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
Talk to your team members and figure out what's going on. Learn
yeah,
how to delegate. Learn who works best doing certain things. If you learn that about your team, you can easily delegate tasks and they can get done even quicker. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So delegating and communicating are very essential to building trust. So
right,
that way you trust your teammates and then they trust you as a leader. Because at the end of the day, it's a back and forth. It's not just one without the other. You have to have trust in both in order to get things done.
mm,
Um, and that just keeps the leader and the team aligned with their
yeah,
goals. There's ways that people can communicate and delegate without it being um confrontational in a bad way. You
right,
know what I'm
right,
saying? And
right,
so there's ways to do that. There's ways to build trust without, like you said, giving up control and feeling like things are just kind of just going off the haywire. You know what I'm saying?
right,
It's just
right.
there's ways to get around that, and you don't have to. Even if you have a lone mentality, you don't always have to stay stuck in that mentality. You
Not
can
at
reach
all.
out and branch out because that's the way to become an effective leader.
Mhm, mhm. I agree.
Definitely. But yeah, that's the way to continue to be a effective leader. Let's kind of dive into this last point. For me, being laid back does not have to equal being a lazy leader. You know what I'm saying? Like you said earlier, you could be laid back. You don't have to have a boisterous personality, but that does not mean you need to be lazy
No.
in your leadership. And I'm not saying being lazy at your job, just being lazy and being a leader in general. Let's talk about how relaxed leadership styles really still require certain boundaries.
And the major thing with relaxed leadership styles, once you communicate and get your team in a good swing of something, and I believe you said this early on, JL, once they know the training and they know how to roll with it, then you could be more hands off.
Relax.
You can
Yeah.
let them do their thing, but like they have to know what to do first. You can't
Mhm.
just dump them in a mystery land and it's like, okay, they're out there trying to swim and they don't even know how to swim. They don't got no life wings, at all. Like what we call it, water wings. That's what it
Well,
is.
yeah, and you're
You
right.
know, they got no floaties. They just up there trying to
Nothing.
like,
They're just out there trying to survive.
in a
They're
river and
gasping for
then
air.
yeah, and then you
And you
just looking
watching them
like
as a leader.
yeah, so it's like, and that's the thing though. It's like you can have your laid back energy. You can have your like, okay, cool, I'm gonna let you do your business, but people gotta know what business they walking into. So if they coming in like, and so many times, especially like in the advocate market, you start like getting a candidate, you hire a candidate, you look at their skill set is there. But if they're coming into a company, that's a whole new brand of a company. Okay.
Mhm.
So how you work and how your mindset works and how the company works is a whole nother setup. So they're new. Okay, so they're new, and like I said, even if you have team members who are on your team, you haven't really engaged with them, and they have like certain methods that are not in your particular structure. No one can read your mind. Okay, no one can read your
Mhm.
mind. Like I said, be a more reserved type of a space when people know. Okay, cool. I know how. For instance, I'm just saying the name. I know how Dan operates. Okay, I know how Gina operates. She likes things this way. This is a part of the company procedures. But when you
Morning,
coming
Gina.
in there, running in, and your head is like on fire based on your speed that you running into somebody saying that they did something wrong. If you did not give them that, same type of guidance that you came in with from somebody else, or maybe you did it, maybe you just learned it for yourself now. But if you're not giving them that guidance, they're gonna mess up. And the thing about it is, though, and with that laid back type of leadership, people really do love y'all. And this is the thing though, because people, like I said, they really do love y'all when it comes down to like being in an environment where they can walk away and say, okay, I'm at peace. But they don't want their peace to be like a roller coaster. That's the biggest thing. Don't make someone peace like a roller coaster. So when you're coming in with conflicts and it's coming out of the blue, people are looking at our procedures. They're like, I didn't learn that. You're making their emotional equilibrium way off. And that's something that you just don't want to do, you know?
Definitely, because
Mhm.
you're making that way off for really everybody involved. Every part of your team, they're gonna
Yes.
feel some type of way,
Yeah.
and it's gonna knock everything off. So then they're frustrated with you, and then they become frustrated with each other.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So that's just something that you just want to avoid, and it's easily avoidable if you kind of just maybe do some self-reflection, self-introspection, and say, "Hey, how?"
Yeah.
If you, especially if you know you're a loner, if you know you have a lone mentality, which most people that are loners they know that.
Yeah.
Um, if you just go ahead and nip those things in the bud before it gets out of hand and out of control, it's something that's easily resolvable and
Yeah.
can make you in way effective leader in ways that can really not only help the company or organization as a whole, help
Right.
yourself and help your team as well. And so that's just something that we kind of want to talk with you guys about, engage with you guys regarding having a lone wolf mentality or a loner mentality. Um, there's ways around it. You know what I'm saying? There's ways to be an effective leader, a chill, relaxed leader without, like we said, being a lazy leader. There's a difference. If you know that you can make changes, do that. Act
Mhm.
on it. Don't just sit back. Don't be afraid to change. Like you said, if you're in a different season, you cannot bring what you did in your last season to this season.
Big time, big time. And like I said, guys, it's all about the learning process. So many times we can sort of get in our rut as far as like looking at everybody else but not ourselves. And that's the thing though with leadership, and even like I said, even in your personal lives, but we focus on leadership right now. The biggest thing is to sort of get out your rut and get out of your main method of doing things. Okay. If it's not working, if you're seeing some limitation, if you're seeing conflict, and so many times, like I said before, sometimes lone wolves or whatever, they don't like a lot of conflict. They're like, okay, ooh, wait a minute. This is getting a little bit rough, but you're going to run into that rough space when you don't do proper things. And, we're going to do a recap. I'm going to recap with you guys right now as far as like, what we learned. We're going to go into some tips as far as next week's excuse me. Next week's. Damn. Next week. Every time we get to that ending, man, I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, we
it'll
getting
be like,
there.
okay.
We get next week's." Like all these little things,
Woo!
I find that we need to make bloopers out of this and put this like for shorts. And
We really
say,
should. We should
yeah,
start
you know what
doing
I'm
that
saying?
for
Like
real.
funny shorts, like next week's.
Like, what the hell did we just say? Ooh.
Seriously. Yeah, we gotta make bloopers out of that. Like, okay, like, whoa, stay tuned for next week. Like, we gonna get the outro right.
Right.
But anyways, guys, I'm gonna recap with you as far as what we learned from the day, and then also what we're gonna learn next week. We're gonna tie in as far as how to be an effective leader when it comes down to like being a lone wolf. We're gonna have some tips next week, and like I said, with this week coming up, be present for your team. Make sure that they get the skills that they need as far as like what they need to do for their day. Set that like team weekly meeting for them. If you haven't talked to your coworkers, it's been like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Okay. You didn't talk to them this morning. Say good morning. Say how you doing. Learn
It's
the
real
name.
simple. It's
Learn
real
the
simple.
name.
You ain't listen, you ain't gotta ask them what all they did this past
Exactly.
weekend. You
Eh,
ain't gotta ask them their family business. You don't even need
Okay.
to know their dog name.
Not at
You don't need
all.
to know none of that, but just kinda be active and present enough for them to know, okay, I can go to my manager and we can
Okay.
communicate effectively to get the job done. That's it.
Okay.
You
Do a
don't
little
have
awkward wave. Just do a little awkward
right.
wave.
Right, that's okay. That's just say, "Hey, it's human interaction. It's normal. It happens. We gotta
Exactly.
do it. Everybody has to do it." So, we wanna thank you guys for tuning into, this episode 3 of Boss Mentality, why your team deserves more than your distance if you're a lone wolf. We really, again, want to just thank you guys and just give us some feedback as well. Give us your comments and your thoughts and concerns about, this type of mentality. If you ever worked with somebody with this type of mentality, or if you have this type of mentality, hopefully you learned something from this. Hopefully, we brought something new and fresh to the table, about how you can handle things. And like I said, like Boss said, next week we will go into the tips. We'll delve into even more tips regarding that. But we just want to thank you guys, and we will see you next week.
All right, till next time.